Good morning to all of you. Myself, Dr. Vishal Sharma, and I would like to welcome you all in this first session of Lightup virtual conference in support to UNICEF, a 24-hour Microsoft learning technologies and fundraising event to fight COVID-19. Today we have with us our first speaker, Cláudio Silva. He works for Siemens on SQL Server Database Administrator and loves PowerShell. Today he's going to talk on Dba tools and PowerBI walked into a bar. And let me have the privilege to invite Cláudio Silva to give his presentation.
Thank you, Vishal.
Yeah, thank you. I will just share your presentation and then you will start.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've shared your presentation. I think you can now.
So, okay. So let's start. First of all, a big thank you for having me and to be able to support these calls with children and these tough times. So today I decided to bring some session which will talk about how we can use the Dba tools PowerShell module to gather data from our SQL Server instance, and then we can save them on the SQL Server database, and by using PowerBI, we can give some meaning to our data to answer a couple of questions that we may have. My name is Cláudio Silva. I'm a SQL Server DBA working for Siemens, and I love PowerShell, as you will see. Again, if you have the chance, if you can, even just $1, please donate to these calls. It will help UNICEF helping the children. So if you haven't done yet, just take the picture, read the QR code, and please donate. A big thank you to all the sponsors that help this conference to be made and to be available for everyone. We are talking about 24 hours of technology sharing all the knowledge that the speakers has with you for free. Okay. Going to our agenda. So we will see what are the pre-requirements and the pre-configurations that we will need to have this kind of solution running. We will see which questions we want to have answered and how we can do that. I will share the scripts and some caveats along the time, but everything is documented and you can leverage from it afterwards. What was my implementation approach? Of course, this can vary on your environment, but at least is a starting point and at least will give you some ideas to work on. How we can save the data to SQL Server. And we will see the database structure, the codes, and the Power BI dashboards to answer these questions. And after that, we have some FAQ if you to answer some of the questions, and if you have more, we can have a talk, of course. Okay, so first of all, regarding the pre-requirements, for this solution, we will need to decide where the solution will be running. And I would say, and it's the way I have configured, for instance, a centralized server that can reach all your other servers, all your SQL Server instance. We will need the Dba tools module installed. So if you don't have internet access to download the module from the PowerShell gallery, you can connect with a server or with a machine that has that connection. You can save the module using the save module commandlet, and then you can copy the module to your server, which doesn't have access to the internet. In case you have internet access, is as easy as using the install module with the name Dba tools. For this particular solution, you will also need the Posh RS job PowerShell module. So this is a module done by Boprox that make possible to run our scripts in parallel with multi-threading. And that will be a plus whenever you want to work with a lot of instances and not just a couple of them. And the other part of the solution is having PowerBI. I'm saying here PowerBI desktop because it is free. So anyone can download and install it on his laptop, on his computer, as long as he has connection to the SQL Server to connect there. However, you can also, if you want, you can also install a Power BI report server if your organization already have it. You can publish your Power BI dashboards to there, and everyone can leverage from the same dashboard on a centralized place to access this data. A quick overview on the kind of architecture that I'm using for this. So I have a central server running SQL Server, where I have my PowerShell scripts and dbatools and PostgreSQL job modules to run them. And then on my environments, I have my environments across the company, which can be development environments, QA, and prods, where each one of them has a couple of instances. And when I run the scripts, I connect to each one of these instances, collect the data, save it on the central server on a specific database, and then using Power BI, I query the data from the central server, and I have my dashboards to answer my questions. The pre-configurations to make sure that you can use all the good things that the dbatools has, because dbatools, if you don't know, is an open source PowerShell PowerShell module, is being built by data professionals to the data professionals, and currently it has more than 500 comments, which can leverage about SQL Server, PowerShell remoting, the WMI, the registry. So it's very important that you do a test and check if from your central server you have everything configured to access the instance. As an example, I work on a very restricted environment where by default, when a new server borns, SQL Server is installed there, and my central instance will not have access to that server by default, which means that I need to request to the firewall team to put the new IP as a destination and my central server as the source to the firewall rules, which will make it possible to connect. And this goes by having the SQL Server instance port, which by default is 1433, but if you use a different port number, of course, you should open that one. You should have the UDP ports, the Internet Control Message Protocol, the DCOM, and the WinRM we put for the PowerShell remoting, because some comments will connect and run things on the server sides to get and to be able to retrieve the data. And in this case, again, in my environment, just to give an example, if I do not use my full qualifying domain name for the servers, along with the use SSL and the include port in SPN, I will not be able to connect to the instance. So it's a very restricted system with a lot of security, which it's possible to use dbatools anyway. So it's not a problem, but you need the right configurations. If you have kind of these situations, or if you need some more configurable settings regarding the PowerShell remoting coverage on dbatools, you can then take a look on these blog posts where I explain how I have added these last two. And of course, if you need, we can add even more. So the next question is, if the firewall team says, I have everything already configured, can you please test how we will test if we have access to, let's say, our 100 instance or more? Test the Dba connection. So all the comments that we will see here that has the DBA on the name are comments that belongs to the dbatools PowerShell module. Test Dba connection is a handy comment that makes possible to connect to the one instance. And whenever you have at least these three settings to true, so connect to the instance, you can ping the server, you can remote access the server. As long as you have this, it should be okay for you to run then the commands from that server to the remote servers. Also, I suggest that you select a credential, so a service account, something like that, that will be running the jobs. And you should test again. So the best way to do it, if you have a specific service account, not your nominal account, is to open a PowerShell session with a run as, use that account, and then you can test. Of course, you will need an account that currently has access to the SQL Server instance, and not only to go by the firewall rules. The next question that I want to answer in here is just a couple of them to make the point and to show what is possible, and then everyone can have different ones and wants to collect different data to answer those questions. I would say, okay, if I want some server data, not the instance, but the server. Let's say that I want to know how many CPU and how many memory I have. I can use the get DBA computer system PowerShell, dbatools PowerShell command. If I want some SQL Server data, let's say the version, the edition, I can use the get DBA instance property. But what if I want some table size, number of records that the table has? We can use the get DBA DB table. We need a command that accesses both the server itself and the instance. We have, for instance, the get DBA disk space. We'll gather the disk space, and we'll also say to you if you have on those disks SQL Server files or not. Okay, so that's why access the server and the instance. If you do not find the command suitable for you to get the data that you want, you can always visit our website, the docs, dbatools.io, which will have, we have a search you can find there for a specific word or specific comments. And if you are without internet access, but you already have the module, you can use the find DBA command to search for a pattern, for a tag, for something that is related with what you are trying to get. Regarding the script development, so what I have done and what are the caveats that are already overtaken, but I will talk about them anyway. So the script pattern is nothing more than the dbatools command that we saw before, running through some instance, collecting the data, and outputting the PowerShell objects, which then we will have a collection time column, because if you want to have this data over the time and being able to show it in PowerBI in a way that we can see the evolution about the things, we have a collection time column where we will be adding the current date time of the execution. And finally, we will pipe these results for the right DBA data table, which will save the data on a SQL Server table that we specify. The caveats, or one of the caveats that we have here, is that some comments, and in this specific case, dbatools has the get DBA instance property, this comment does not output the results as a table with a lot of columns, but instead in a more or less key pair value. So what I have written is a function called invoke transpose data table that will do the rotation of this table and make every single key a column and every single value the value of that column. So it's something like this. These current comments have this pattern. So we call get DBA instance property, and the output will come in a vertical way where we have all the name of the properties and their values. But after running the function that will do the rotation of the table, we will have something like this. So all the column names became all the key names became the column names, and all the values is now under the same row, and that is much easier to save. So we can save on the table, and then we can keep tracking of the evolution if we had more or less CPUs and so on. The implementation So answering the question how it runs. So, okay, we have the scripts, we have everything set up to run, but how we should put it run on a daily basis or a week basis to collect the data without the need to go there and run the scripts by ourselves. So for this, I have decided to go with the SQL Server Agent jobs on my central server. I suggest that you request a dedicated domain account or a service account with the permissions on the instance. So it should be the same account that you have decided before to test the Dba Connection. And you can put it as a owner of the job, because that way it will run the job as that account, or you can create a SQL credential and using the proxy, you can use to run the job steps. The suggestion is to have one job with multiple steps. Each step will invoke one of these scripts. And of course, you should find the best schedule to run it. If you need help about to set up the agent job to run PowerShell scripts, please go to the dbatools.io/agents, and there you will find the instructions how to do it to make it possible. As a suggestion, if you have a lot of instances, and if you are running it, them, let's say not in parallel, or if you have even more scripts that you want to run, and by running one script after the other, even if they are running for multiple instances at a time, it starts to take a long time. You can split your job and create different jobs with different steps, and probably most of the steps can be run even in parallel. So if you have two jobs, with each one with 2 or 3 scripts to run, it will be okay to you, and will become much faster to finish the whole run. Regarding the data that is saved to the SQL Server, as I said before, we are using the right DBA data table, and why? So first, we have an parameter called auto-generate, which will generate the table. It will try to infer the data types of the objects and create that table structure on the SQL Server. However, it's important because to call out about this, whenever we have strings, mainly you will get the nvarchar max, which I should call out and say, do not forget to change them. So if you pick a new table or a new script to run, and you create the table, you can leverage on this to create the table, but then please alter, script the table, alter and save on your source control to have a better data types and data size for this nvarchar max. Also, as a suggestion, create a cluster index and use compression. It's available on any edition since SQL Server 2016 Service Pack 1. So even if you are running on a standard edition or something like that, you can use it, and you will save a lot of space, because if you run this every day or every week, most of the data will be more or less the same, which means that you can leverage a lot from the compression. Okay, so now let's see some code and some visuals regarding this solution. And for that, I will pass my presentation for the Azure Data Studio. So I'm using the Azure Data Studio to with a notebook to be easier to follow along about these steps. And first of all, I want to show you here the table structure and what we have. So currently, let's pick we have one table called instance, which is the table that will have all the instance names that you have on your environment, and which port they are running, which environment they belong, because this will be helpful then on the Power BI to filter out and to search for some information. And as I said before, here I have created a table with more proper data types and data size, and also I have had in this case a constraint, because I want that by default my SQL Server instance name to be the default one. Then if we go to a different table, and all the other tables are related with the data that we are getting using dbatools. Here, as you can see, I'm creating a table with all the data that is outputted by the command of the dbatools, and also I'm creating a cluster index, okay, using compression. This way, I can live with more data over the time. And the same applies to every single table that we have here. So for these ones, if you want to start with these ones, you can grab these scripts for my GitHub repository. You can just compile and run there, and you will be okay to start. If you use different dbatools commands to get different data, you will need to create the first time the table, fulfill the right data types, compress with a cluster index, and then you are good to go. To get the data, so what I have, this is a view. So it's a view that is building my full qualified domain name, so my host name with my domain, and also if I have not a non-default PowerShell instance, it will get that instance from here, and also the port. So this way I can have my FQDN for the instance and use that to connect to them. Finally, the one agent job that will have dbatools data to connect. So here, what happens, we have just a job, and we will call on each step a PowerShell command with the script that we have. And the script that I will show you in a minute runs with the verb run as, so with a higher privilege, and we'll collect the data and save the data on the tables. So before showing you the scripts, I want to show you here. So I'm connecting to my localhost, my dbatools database. And here, I'm just trying to show that for all the tables I have here, you will not find here the nvarchar -1, which becomes the max. So the table structure is there and is, let's say, with much more correct data types. Here, just to show that what will look like in the end a table of the instance. So if you have a lot of different host names, you put them here, you configure, and then this is the ones that we will use to start exploring the data. The job itself, as I said before, and showed the script, but here you can see I have already a dbatools collect info job, one step for each script here, which calls the command line, and then here, if I can grab this, you will see that we are running on a specific folder, a specific file to collect this data. Now, for the test purpose, for the empty database, so let's say for what you can get if you want to install and to run this kind of solution, I will change here my kernel for PowerShell, because now I will run PowerShell commands. And what I will do is I will pick a backup file, which is a template database without any data there, but already with some tables. I will use dbatools with the restore dba database to restore my a template of my database. So I'm replacing the existing one. First time it will take a little bit longer because it's loading the module. And then what we will check is that the database will be there. Just one more second. Okay, so it's done. So as you can see here, my computer name, my backup file where it was, the backup size, database name that I have created is dbatools2, how much time it took to restore, 6 seconds, the files where it's restored. So everything is here. I have done with replace, which means that right now, if I go here to my dbatools, and if I want to select the data from my instance, this is empty. Okay, so now with this in place, again, get dba database. So it's one of the commands that we will use to collect data from the instance, but here to show that the database exists and some data about it. And now I will use invoke dba query just to insert one entry on my dbo instance table, which will be my local hosts, and I will output what it is there. So just to show, we have added one entry. So if I come here and select, now I have one entry on my dbatools 2 database. And now we will put the job running using dbatools. So we have our get Dba agent job. We can connect to our local instance, and we will get our job. And then because this outputs a job object from the SQL Server Agent, we can use the start method to initiate the job. And we can do this. It will run and asynchronous. So now if I use the get Dba agent job and check by for my job, we will see that the current status will be running. So it will be running the 5 or 6 scripts that I have there. So here, as you can see, is executing, okay? And of course, if we run this right now, doesn't have any data yet, because this table is not yet fulfilled, but in a couple of minutes, we'll have them here. While we wait for this, let's here take a look on the scripts, okay? So when we have the data collection, how the script is built and how the data is being collected from there. So let's pick the computer system, for instance. And let me briefly explain the code here. So we are importing the module. We are setting some configurations, in this case, regarding dbatools configuration. So I'm saying that whenever you run PowerShell commands and you need to use PowerShell rebooting, please, for this session, the use SSL should be true. And my include port in SPN should also be true. Here, I'm saying I need to define what is my central server, what will be my central database where I will save the data. And here I decide my throttling, the number of sessions that I will want to have running in parallel for each one of these scripts. And here, my suggestion is that you should test first and take a look, because depending on the horsepower that you have on your server, the number of CPUs and so on, this number may change. What is important to understand is that if you have, let's say, 100 instances to run, if you put the throttle with 10, you may end with less than half of the time comparing when you need to run one by one in a serial way. To run this, we first get our server lists, and our server lists, as I said before, I'm using my view and get my FQDN. Here, I can or cannot filter by a domain. Let's say, in my case, I have multiple domains. So if I want, I will have different service accounts from different domains. And by using this environment variable, the script will know that I'm running for the environment, for the domain A or domain B, and then I can get from the database just this instance. Picking the server list, invoking DBA query will invoke this query, getting just the FQDN, and will create a list of servers that will be used later. Then what we have here is related with the POSH RS job PowerShell module that I said before that we will be using to have the multi-threads. So to run the start RS job, we should have a script block. Okay, so in this case, because we have a couple of commands to run, as said before, we have a dbatools command. In this case, get DBA computer system. Then we will add just one member, a property with the current date time. And finally, we'll pipe this to the right DBA table, where I will say, please insert the data on this instance, on this table, on this specific table. And if I do not have the table created, it will auto-create. And the other thing is that you have a batch size. Whenever you are running something that will output multiple lines, let's say the table information for one database, you can change here the batch size to try to fine-tune your throughput to the database. So this script block will pick two parameters, the central server and the central database, that will be passed here on the argument list. So with this, I can say, okay, for each my server list, please pipe the values for the start RS job, use this script block, the throttle will be 10 in this case, use these arguments to pass the parameters inside, and then wait for the jobs to finish. Behind the hood, what will happen is that we will have, let's say, from 100 instances, we will start to have 10 parallel threads running. When one of these finish, it will immediately start another one with a different instance, and so on, which means that we will start with 10, we will always keep with 10 until we get over the 90, and then it will finish to run. Once that it finish, we receive just the jobs. This is something just to clear out the, to get what outputted here. In this case, will not output anything because we are just writing to the database. And finally, we can clean up and get the jobs that were created and remove them just to clear our cache. And this is pretty much the same for every single command that we have. What can change? Something like this. So for the get DBA database, this returns, if we get all the properties, it will return even more properties than these ones. So what I have done here, I have picked the ones that I decided that were important to me and to keep tracking over the time, and I'm just selecting these ones. Adding again my collection date time and saving the data for a specific table on the database. Same thing. To show you the caveat that I mentioned before related with the DBA instance property. So here you can find the function that I have adapted. I found on the internet, wrote it and adapted, where it will do the rotation of the table. So in this case, because this is a very quick command that will output just let's say one line in the end, what we are doing here is slightly different of the other. So we are saying for each one of the server lists that we have, please get the data, do the transpose, and add it to a final data table. And then in the end, we pick on our new data table, and that is the one that we write to the database. And it's done. Okay, now I will show an example of a dashboard with data there. Let me just double check here if we already, so as you can see, we already have some data on our database table. These are my local database on my localhost instance, and if we go here, we can double check if the job is still executing or if it's already finished. We'll open my Power BI dashboard. So I will show first the one I have with more data to give you the feeling about what we will have after a couple of days. And then I will show you the empty one, what happens when we refresh for the to get the new data. Seconds. Don't save this one, and just 1 second. Come on. Okay, so it's, so do not look to my great visual dashboard skills. So the idea here is just to show to you if you have the correct tables and the correct relationships and so on. Here you can drag and drop a couple of things and just give some numbers. And as here as an example, I'm showing all my environments, and when I click here, we can see all of these filtering out. So it's quite easy to understand how many databases, how many servers, and so on we have per environment. The other example that we can have here is related with the question. So I'm running on a virtual server, I'm running in bare metal. So because the data that we have from the server property, we can know that. And here in this case, all of my instances are running in virtual for this example. But again, we can go here, and for the list of servers that I have here, I can filter out and just get some data from specific instance or a set of instances. Regarding disk space, we can have an idea for the instance, and even for a specific mount point or specific drive, how it looks like over the time. So let's say that I want to see my data where SQL Server MDF and DF files are, and I can see that I have 2 terabytes and I'm almost 1 terabyte in use. Okay. So this is the other thing that we can use, and of course, changing here for different instances will bring different values, and that is the idea, to try to understand where we are and where we go. Regarding the instance, and here you can see which version and edition we are running to have that idea if you have a lot of instances in that values or not. You can use and filter out here, and here to show one thing that I have filter out here, but you haven't seen this one filter. I'm still showing the 8 instance. The thing here, and this was on purpose, is that to show you that we have a couple of relationships here created between our views and our tables, and of course we need to have this correct in order to have the data being filtered all the time. So now if I filter the UTREC, I will get the SQL Server 2016, and if I take off, it will show everything again. Regarding database, so here you can answer questions like, is my tables growing a lot, or is my database growing a lot or not? And we can have, I will pick this example here. So I will pick one database with archive in the name. And this is what you may be thinking. It's, let's say, a housekeeping database that is getting a lot of data from the other database over the time, which means that it's almost always increasing over the time regarding the space occupied. And this with Power BI, we can, for instance, try to put here a visual that will show to us for the database a forecast and say, okay, so if right now my database has X amount of space being in use, and we need to put here our collection date time. And now if I say, please use here our select our data space usage in gigabytes. So as you can see, from the 10th of September to the end of the month, so about 15 days, 20 days, it increased about 30 gigabytes. So what can happen in 30 days if this ratio of increasing space continues? So you can use the Power BI for that. You can use here the forecasts, and you can say, please tell me in 30 days what do we can expect for it. And by doing this, we can say, okay, in 30 days, if the same or based on these data points that we have before, is expected that your database reach between 132 gigabytes or 139. So this can be quite useful if you want to have a prediction on how much the data will grow and when you probably need to think about more disk space without or before hitting the threshold of your disks, let's say. And here, regarding the table, one of the things that I usually use here to have an idea is when the clients ask, okay, so how much, I know that my database is growing a lot. I know that has a lot of rows there, but what is the pattern? Are increasing the number of rows on the weekdays and on the weekend is much lower. It's otherwise, can we see a pattern? And here you can have that answer. So here, this has a custom SQL query written that is pointing to our database table, but it's a different one that will get the day before and the current day and doing the math to understand, okay, so between, let's say, between Friday and Saturday, my table grows 507,000 rows in this day, and between Saturday and Sunday. So because these are the 2 weekends days, grows another 300 something, and then we have 1 million over the week. And again, we can see and compare how this growth goes along the way with the evolution of the whole table. Okay, so it's a nice way to understand this when sometimes all the standard table grows a few hundred of gigabytes and you are not expecting that, and you can see on which day that happened, and maybe that will help to understand if it was something related with a new deployment or an upgrade or something like that. Now I will show you the empty dashboard and what you will need to do whenever you want to get this solution, and as a starting point after running your first time the job. And here I will use my other Power BI that will point for the dbatools 2 database, which is the one that we have used to collect the data. So right now, if we come here and if we, well, it's opening. If we come here and if we take a look on our database, we can see here all the database and all the size, the compatibility level, last full backup, and so on for this. And whenever you open the first time the Power BI, you will get something with a lot of blanks because this was saved pointing to a database without any data. And here, the only thing that you need to do, because you may want not to name your database dbatools or dbatools2, you can go here and we have parameters. So, and if you just change here your instance name and here your database name, you are good to go, and you can just hit the refresh button, and this will connect to the data module and run the queries on the database, bring the data to here, and refresh our dashboard with the data that we were collecting. And of course, after couple of days, weeks, months running this, getting data every day, you will have a very good idea about the evolution of the stuff. So let's see here. So I will see just one computer, my domain, development environment, which was the one that I select. This is my computer name. And here I have Lenovo, okay, with number of CPUs, number of processors, and so on. And again, disk space. You can have a look on the C in the D drive. Regarding the instance, we can see so what is the version, and will be the custom version of the database. And here for the whole database that I have on my instance, I can take a look and see how much is occupying for, in this case, I just have data from today. But of course, if you have more data along the time, you will see the evolution on the size, on the forecasts, and so on. Okay, so let's back to our to the presentation.